change tangent. Okay, so then cosine of 15 is equals to cosine of two angles, 45 minus 30. Here, the u could be 45 and the v could be 30. Now put it into the formula. The formula calls for cosine of u, so it's cosine of 45, and then times cosine of v, which is cosine of 30, and then it's plus, there you go, is the opposite sign, yes. So it's cos plus, and then it's sine of the first angle, which is 45, and then it's sine of the second angle, which is 30.
And it's plus because you always do the opposite?
You always do the opposite on cosine. In sine, you do the same thing. Okay, so then we need to know what cosine of 45 is. Do you remember what cosine of 45 is? That's it. So it's the square root of 2 over 2.
Times square root 3 over 2.
Is square root of 3 over 2? That is so nice. Well, let me draw my triangle for those who still don't visualize what that is. 30, this is a 1, square root of 3, and 2. Opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So when you get cosine of 30, that is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And have you said square root of 3 over 2, Victoria? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Great, yes. And now plus sine of 45, and that is the same thing as square root of 2 over 2. Right? Now sine of 30, 1/2. And at this point, it's just a matter of multiplying across. So it's the square root of 2 times the square root of 3 is square root of 6. 2 times 2 is 4. Square root of 2 times 1 is the square root of 2. 2 times 2 is 4.
It's the same thing.
Is the same thing. And the reason why that is the same thing is because both angles are complementary angles. So if you get sine of 75, that's the same thing as cosine of 15. If you get sine of 30, that's the same thing as cosine of 60. So complementary angles would be the same values for the opposite sine and cosine. Okay, so that's the same thing. Okay, next problem. Now let's go ahead and practice with one using tangent. Okay, tangent of 105. That can be rewritten as tangent of the sum of two angles. Which angles?
45.
Okay.
60.
45 and 60, that is good. Okay, so then u can be 45, v can be 60. So when I rewrite the formula, that's going to be tangent of u, which is 45, the same sign for tangent, plus, and then it's tangent of 60, all over 1, minus, and then is tangent of u, which is 45, times tangent of v, which is 60. So I'm just following the formula. You have the formula on this side. You'll be able to see that, you know, you just get. If you look at the formulas, if you look at the bottom of, on the denominator, you're going to see. So tangent of 45, I look at the 45, 45, 90. That would be 1. That's right, because the opposite side is 1. And the adjacent side is 1. So tangent of 45, that's just 1. Okay, so plus. Tangent of 60, if I look at the 30, 60, 90 triangle, that's opposite is 1, adjacent is square root of 3. So tangent of 60, that would be opposite is the square root of 3, adjacent is 1. So tangent of 60 is just square root of 3. Right? Because it's a square root of 3 over 1, which is just a square root of 3. So that's just a square root of 3.
And how do you know which triangle to use first or which triangle to use?
Depending on the,
It says on the 45 or 60.
right, so it's 45, so use the 45, 45, 90.
So you use both? Okay.
Right. So it depends on the angle that you're using, the triangle that you have to rely on.
And they
Yes.
always have to be like we're always going to have to use 45, 60, and 30, right?
Right, the special,
And 92.
right, triangles. The 90, sometimes you use it, but the 90, you just look at the y-axis and look at the point. The x is the cosine, the y is the sine. Right? So we just go with that coordinate point. Yeah. Okay, now at the bottom, you have 1 minus You know that tangent of 45 was 1 times tangent of 60 was the square root of 3. So here, that's the same thing as 1 plus square root of 3 divided by 1 minus square root of 3. Okay, so then so far that's what we have. But if you go back and remember about the radicals, we cannot have radicals on the denominator.
You have to multiply it,
Right.
1 plus square root of 3.
Wouldn't it be the bottom square root of 3?
That is right. The bottom is a problem. We cannot have a radical on the bottom. So we have to multiply by the conjugate of the bottom binomial. That's right. So when you multiply those two, you have to use FOIL method. So think about this being binomials like that, and you have to use FOIL method. Okay? So when you multiply first times first, that's 1 times 1 is 1. And then the outer would be what? 1 times square root of 3 is square root of 3. Then square root of 3 times 1 is positive square root of 3, no? Okay, so square root of 3 times 1 is square root of 3. And then the square root of 3 times the square root of 3.
Square root of 9.
And
so just 3.
square root of 9 is just 3. There you go. So it's just 3 plus 3. At the bottom, you use FOIL method again. So it's 1 times 1. That's just 1. And then it's 1 times square root of 3. So it's positive square root of 3. And then it's negative square root of 3 times 1. Negative square root of 3. And then last, negative square root of 3 and positive square root of 3. Negative square root of 9, which is just negative 3. And this is where in the morning, if you watch that video, you're going to see that we just,
Cancel that, right?
yes, we put a plus as a sign, and then at the end, it was not the same answer, and it just gave us a hit. It was like, no, miss, let's just give up on this, and da-da-da. Like, no, you guys. And I was so glad that I made that mistake, because you might make that mistake where only one sign is wrong and everything is wrong. So you just have to be very careful, okay? So here we can cancel out the square root of 3 and the negative square root of 3. And then you combine. In this case, you can combine square root of 3 plus the square root of 3. That would give you 2 square root of 3, right? And when you combine the numbers, 1 plus 3, what is that equals to? That is 4, right? So it's going to be 4 plus 2 square root of 3. I'm just combining like terms.
At the bottom, was it negative 2?
Negative 2. That's right. So at the bottom is just negative 2.
And you can divide negative 2 by 4 and 2, right?
Absolutely, yes. We can just put 4 divided by negative 2, and also 2 square root of 3 divided by negative 2. And that can be simplified, and that would give you negative 2,
Plus
just minus, because positive divided by negative is negative, minus square root of 3.
is that your answer?
And that is the final answer. So if you check with the calculator tangent of 105, the values should be the same. So let's go ahead and check that just to. Right, tangent of negative 7 pi over 12, we have to know our angles. So what is negative 7 pi over 12? How many degrees is that? Do you say 105? Is it? Okay. So here we have to go back to the lesson number 1, where we multiply, just in case you don't remember how to get that. No?
105.
It's 7 times 180, and then divided by 12. If you want to know how many degrees is that.
But isn't it negative?
And it's negative. That's right. So let me find out how many degrees is that. 7 times 180 divided by 12. And that is negative 102.
105.
105. So here, this is the same thing as tangent
Which is the top.
of negative 105, which is the top one, right? So now, what we need to do is to show the work using radians, but it's negative 105, okay? So then,
So it's the same
So when
word.
it's negative, we're going to use radians, or?
no,
Oh, okay.
right. So here, I'm going to say, okay, so this is the same thing as tangent of Negative 105. Which two angles can we use here?
Same thing, 60 plus
You mean negative 60 and negative 45? Right? And negative 60 would be the same thing. In radians would be what? Negative
3.
pi over 3. And 45 is negative pi over 4.
So pi over
Right? So basically here, are we adding those two negative angles? We are adding, right? Right. But we're adding two negative angles.
Wait, was it the 45 positive?
No, because they both negative.
In order for you to have a negative, you have to get two negatives, add them up, and equals to negative 105.
Oh, okay, it's
Right?
because we're adding it.
Right. Okay, so then tangent, let me just rewrite that, of negative pi over 3 plus negative pi over 4. And when I follow the formula, that's basically the same thing as tangent of u, and tangent of u is negative pi over 3 plus tangent of v, and v is negative pi over 4, all over 1 minus the product of the value of tangent of u, which is negative pi over 3, and then times tangent of v, which is pi over 4. Now we have to get those values. We need to know what is tangent of negative 60 and negative 45. Okay. So, let's see. And let me draw the triangles. And now the triangle, it's negative, so that means that I have to go down to the fourth quadrant. Right? So I have to go down to the fourth quadrant, and that's negative 60. This angle is negative 60. So that would be negative square root of 3, 1, and 2. Right? If I look at those angles being negative 60 going down. So is it negative 3, right? Because his opposite is negative square root of 3 and adjacent is 1. So that would be negative 3. No, the opposite to the 60, that's the opposite, and this is the adjacent. So it's negative square root of 3. Right? So it's negative square root of 3. And now for tangent of negative 45, let me sketch a little triangle that is a 45.
Miss, can you rush me?
Go ahead. Negative 1, 1, and this is a square root of 2. So tangent of negative 45, that would be what?
1, negative 1.
Negative 1. So it's negative 1. And then on the bottom, let's just put the same thing. 1 minus the product of those two numbers, which is negative square root of 3 and negative 1. So that is negative square root of 3 minus 1 all over. And now let's multiply those two numbers. Negative times negative is,
Don't you distribute the negative one?
well, you multiply them, both of them. So it's negative times
Oh.
negative is positive times negative, it's negative. So all of this is going to be just negative 1 minus square root of 3. Okay, I just simplify, multiply all the signs. Now at this point, I just have to rationalize the denominator. So multiply by the conjugate, 1 plus square root of 3, 1 plus square root of 3. And then you use this derivative property, the FOIL method. Just turn it off, one, please. Okay, so use this derivative property. And that would be negative square root of 3 times 1 is negative square root of 3. Negative square root of 3 times positive square root of 3. How much is that? Negative square root of 9, which is negative 3. When you simplify that, so it's minus 3. And at the, what else? Then let's multiply the negative 1 times 1. That's negative 1. And then negative 1 times square root of 3. negative square root of 3. Okay, so that's the denominator. On the numerator, let's multiply using FOIL. That would be 1 plus square root of 3 minus the square root of 3 minus square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, so it's minus 3. And that would be also, yes, negative 2. Let me just move this a little more this way. Okay, so I cancel out the square root of 3's. At the top, you're going to combine the numbers, so
Negative 4 minus 2 square root of 3.
-4 minus 2 square root of 3, that's right, all over negative 2. So would that be the same scenario as the other one? Right? So in that case, it's going to be positive 4 plus square root of 3. And that is tangent of, let me just put that here. So now let me put that into the calculator and let's check those two values to see if that is, oh, that is right. This is supposed to be just 2. It's Jesus, isn't it? The one who spotted it first. Right, Jesus? Was it you? Okay. And when you add 2 plus 1.70 something, that gives you the 3 point.
Did you do that on purpose? Because I was too, like, big on this.
I had it on my paper, I wasn't looking at it.
Really? You should say something. Because you're following
You
along.
missed out on extra
Yeah.
credit points.
So that's the same thing. Go ahead. Any questions?
She's like, whoever finds it, you get an extra point.
And it was on the last step. And it could be just one little thing, like something like that. Okay, so that is the value of sine, cosine, tangent, and tangent with just not degrees but radians. Now, the second part is a lot easier, okay? Because the second part, all we have to do, so sine of 49, because as u, 11 is v, you subtract those two, and that must be 38. Right? 49 minus 11 is 38. Right? Okay. So then it's sine of 38. And that's the answer. Sine of 38 is the answer. That's how you got to do.
You don't have to do anything with the second part?
No, the second one, if you look at the formula, it's following
Oh, it's just a-
the formula. Yeah. Now, what about cosine, cosine? Which formula would that follow?
Cosine.
The cosine. And cosine, like we said, is going to be the opposite sign of whatever's in the middle. So it's going to be subtraction of two angles. U and V, U and V. So it's 133 minus 58. And when you subtract that, that must be cosine of what?
It's
75? And I don't have to put parentheses anymore, so let me get rid of that parentheses. So it's cosine of 75 degrees. And that's the answer. So this one, they just want you to write it as an expression of sine, cosine, or tangent. Now, number 6 is more than likely that that's tangent, right? So that is tangent. This is U and V. So tangent follows the sine. So if there's a minus on the top, it's going to be in the minus between U and V. That's right. So it's 59 minus 11 is 40 what? 48? Okay. So it's 48 degrees. So that's all we're going to do in the second part. Okay? Okay. Right. And that is easy. But now let's get into the fractions, radians. Okay, let's follow the same idea.
Okay, just turn it into degree.
But the answer has to be in radians.
No, we just converted that.
If you want, whichever you want to do. But let me show you the way to do it with the radians, okay? It's not that hard. First of all, sine, cosine, it's got to be sine, right?
Don't you just get a common denominator?
Basically, yes, that's all it is. You multiply the two denominators, okay? So it's a plus because the sign in the middle is a plus and it's a sine. And then you just put the two angles, pi over 5 and pi over 11. Now, to add those two, I'm going to do it the way that I learned in Mexico. This is the way you do it in Mexico. You just multiply those two numbers in the bottom. So it's 5 times 11 is 55, right? And that's going to be your denominator.
And then you just
Multiply
add 11 plus.
these two, and you put it first, 11 pi, because it's like looking for the least common denominator. That's basically all it is. And then plus 5 times pi, and that is 5 pi. And then just combine that. 11 pi plus 5 pi is 16 pi over 55. Yeah, I don't think it's that hard, right? I think it's more work if you change it to degrees and then come back and do it. It's like a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
So for that one, you just multiply the bottom
Mm-hmm.
and then cross multiply.
Right. And then combine whatever you have in the numerator. And that's the answer. Okay? Let's do number 8. Same way. Okay, so what is this going to be? It's cosine, right? So it's cosine. What sign should we put in the middle of the u and the v?
Is it minus?
Minus, right? Subtraction, because it's the opposite. Yes. So here is basically the same idea. Pi over 5, and this is pi over 7. So common denominator, 35. So I'm going to have a 35 in the bottom, and I'm going to skip one step, okay? Now 7 times pi is 7 pi minus 5 times pi is 5 pi, and then just subtract those two numbers.
2 pi over 35.
That is right. So it's cosine of 2 pi over 35. And now in some cases, you can simplify the coefficients, okay? The 2 and the 35s in this case.
You can.
But in this case, you cannot. So you just leave it like that, okay? Any questions about number 8? So far, so good? Okay. Now, number 9.
Yeah, should we miss like how many sections? Should we miss any? I feel bad for Shem.
Right? Yeah. Oh, my God, yeah. Okay, so tangent of, this is going to be the u and the v. So that would be 2x. Same sign, right? Minus. Now, can we do something with the ux, the 2x and the 6y? No, you cannot combine them. So that's it. You're done with this one. That's the answer.
What about the bottom part?
The bottom, you know how it's tangent of u and tangent of v? So it's following the formula.
Oh.
Okay? So it's just tangent of 2x minus 6y, and we're done. So
What
that
this
is
page for homework?
the lesson for
Tangent.
5.3. Uh-huh.